Welcome to the Drop the Needle podcast, your backstage pass to the mystical realm. I'm your host, Jim Alstott, and here, gifted souls step up to the mic sharing their spiritual journey. We're hitting the high notes and the low notes of their awakening, creating a symphony of enlightenment. This isn't just another interview show. This is where divine insights are channeled and universal truths are revealed. So crank up your stereo and sit back, because who knows, this just might help you compose the next transformative chapter of your soul's purpose. Are you ready? Let's go. This is the Drop the Needle podcast, and I'm Jim Alstott. My guest today was a committed atheist until two near-death experiences cracked the world wide open. She went to medical school at 54, trained as an evidential medium in England, and now helps people heal wounds they inherited but never earned. The bridge between science and soul, walking and talking. Please welcome Dr. Lotte Valentin. Welcome, Lotte.
Oh, thank you, Jim. It's such a pleasure to be here.
You know, I am beyond excited to have you on. I really am, because you and I had an opportunity to speak beforehand, which I normally do with all of the guests, to do a pre-show call just to see if we vibe and all that good stuff. But one step further, we went one step further, and I was actually able to have an ancestral healing session with you, which we'll talk about later. And I think people may find that pretty interesting. But now, Dr. Lotte, can you do me a favor, and everyone else? Can you take a moment and let people get to know you a bit and give us your background?
Yes. I was actually born and raised in Europe, in Northern Europe, in Sweden, which is part of Scandinavia. So you got Norway, Sweden, Finland. And people often confuse it with Switzerland and the Alps, but Sweden is further north. So think reindeer and polar bears. It's right underneath the Arctic Circle.
Okay. Okay.
We do have reindeer. You know, Santa's reindeer. They're reindeer herders in the northern part of Sweden.
Okay.
Right. So very different. I grew up in Stockholm, which is more in the middle, or a little bit further south in the middle, in the capital, or in the suburb of the capital. And back when I grew up in the 1960s and 70s, the state and the church had not yet separated. So if you were born in Sweden back then, I was born 1958, you were automatically a Lutheran. And if you didn't want to be a Lutheran, you would have to tell somebody. So you were automatically a Lutheran. And when we needed a passport, we went to the church to get a passport.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And I think it was during the 70s, when I was like junior high school, the church and the state finally separated. And I met my American husband in high school. He was an exchange student in my high school during my junior year. And then I got married and I moved to the United States in 1979. And he had 1 year left at Boston University, and I worked as a secretary at the biomedical engineering department at Boston University when we came here. And then the professors there convinced me that I should transfer from Stockholm's University in Sweden to Boston University. And they really wanted me to study engineering. They said, you have a knack for this. You know, you're very logical, and, you know, you should study computer science. I said to myself, I just can't do that. And so I said, no, I'll do business, because growing up in Sweden, we major in high school. And so if you're going to be a doctor or a nurse, you go the science line in high school. And so we go from high school straight into nursing, straight into medical school, straight into study to be a lawyer. We don't have that 4 years, because we do those years in high school. And so the way it's set up is 3 years of junior high and 3 years of high school.
Okay.
So back then, all my teachers said I was very good, you know, in chemistry and physics and all of that. And we do a lot of that in junior high. And they said, oh, you should go the science line. And I said to myself, again, I can't do that. I'm not going to meet anybody. They're all very nerdy, and I wanted to be in the popular group. I mean, you're 14, 15 years old when you try to make these decisions. So I made
life decisions as a teenager. Wow.
Yes. And so I said, no, I'm going to major in languages and business. So I majored in languages and business in high school. So then here I am at Boston University working as a biomedical engineering departmental secretary, typing research papers on not computers, but typewriters. Okay.
Yeah.
Back then. And I had no idea what I was typing because they were all science words. And you don't learn that when you learn, school English. You learn conversational English. So all the words were I was just letters. I had no idea what I was typing sometimes. Anyway, so I decided to major in business and computer science. And out of college, I was working for IBM in Westchester County, New York, for the America Far East Corporation headquarters in Tarrytown, New York. And then I started having kids, and my husband's job took us to California. And so I took a leave of absence, and eventually I ended up having to leave IBM because then I had another child. And then I had a third child. And we were living in Southern California, and this is where my life really took a turn. So growing up in that Swedish society, I was confirmed when I was 14 with, a lot of my friends. It was kind of more, tradition. This is what you do kind of thing. And I had no belief system. And it's interesting because my dad was a physician and he grew up going to Sunday school since he was 3 years old. I mean, he knew the Bible backwards and forward.
Wow.
And he said, no, I am not going to push that on my own children for whatever reason. And he said, when you grow up, you decide what religion is right for you. And that's how I grew up. So I was never forced to go to church, though I was confirmed. Mm-hmm. And then my life took a turn after I had my third child and had my first near-death experience.
Right. Okay, so we're gonna drill down into some of those here in just a moment, and when we start asking some questions, and I hope you don't mind, because that's something that I have found to be a common thread with a lot of people's gifts opening up, right? Well, and I'd like to, and I'm sure you've talked about this over and over again to ad nauseum, but can you maybe explain to people what it was like, the feeling and everything else that was going on with that?
Yeah, so I was hemorrhaging after I gave birth to my daughter, and I hemorrhaged after birth, and then I hemorrhaged 10 days later, 11 days later, 12 days later. And I went to the ER. They sent me home. I went to the doctor. They sent me home. This is 1992. And I ended back up in the ER. And, I had lost so much blood by now because it's like the third day of hemorrhaging in a row. And as I'm lying on that table in the ER, and I can hear the room filling with people, I got a nurse on my right quoting my blood pressure. I got a nurse on my left trying to place an IV, but I'm now going into shock. So your veins collapse. So it makes it really hard to access your veins. So here I am on this table. And to me, it just felt like I jumped out of an airplane without a parachute. I'm just like feeling like I'm falling through space. And it's probably my blood pressure, right? That's just crashing.
Sure.
I just feel like I'm falling. And the nurse on my right yells out, 50 over 15, hurry. And that's my blood pressure. And I keep feeling like I'm falling. And I'm lying on this table thinking, what's taking her so long? And then I realized at that moment, that I was dying. And it was very different from giving birth, because I gave birth in the middle of the Landers quake, which was a 7.4 earthquake and a 7.2 earthquake. And my daughter was born between the two, the 7.4 and the 7.2. So we lost all the power in the hospital. It was one of those moments in my life when I thought I was going to die. And this was a very different experience because I knew that I was dying, right? A lot of times we're driving on the freeway, somebody cuts us off and we're like, this is it.
I almost died. Yeah, right.
Yeah, my life is over.
Yeah.
Right? You come so close. But this was a different experience because at that moment I knew that I was dying. And the complete atheist that I was at the time did not believe in anything. It was very black and white. My dad was a physician, very scientific. You can't prove it. Then it doesn't
exist,
right? It doesn't exist. So here I am, the atheist on the table in the ER. So what do? I pray to God to save my life. I said, well,
Wow.
if there's any truth in what they taught me when I was 14, this is all I have at this moment. And so I said, please let me live. I have 3 children under the age of 6. I had a 6-year-old boy, a 3.5-year-old boy, and a newborn baby girl. And as soon as I said that, I got pulled out of my body. And, the first thought was, how can I be outside my body and still be me? How does this work? Because my whole belief system was, you die, it's black, you're gone, you don't exist anymore. And here I am outside my body. My body's down on the table and I'm floating here in space. And I'm still me. I'm still thinking. I'm still the way I feel right now in my body. I'm outside my body, but I'm still the same person.
Did you see yourself? Were you able to see yourself? Like
I have no memory of seeing myself, just knowing my body is below me.
Okay.
But in this state, you have access to time, and there was no time. It drove me crazy for years. There was no past, no present, no future. It was all the same. It was as if, you could access the past and the future and the present all at the same time. I searched the library, the San Francisco Public Library, for anything that could tell me, why is there no time on the other side? So anyway, there is just, you're completely, you're at peace. It's just, unconditional love and peace. You're not worried anymore about, oh my gosh, my kids, and how are they going to grow up without a mom? It's just gone. You're just in this peace state. Wow, I'm outside my body. How can I be me? How does this work?
Wow.
Right? So you lose all those worries. And then, luckily they saved me. I got pulled back into my body. And then the next morning, as I'm in the hospital, and I'm thinking, I'm trying to come to terms with, how could I be outside my body?
What just happened?
What just happened?
Right.
What is this? Was it a hallucination? You come close to death, and then, now we know it's not a hallucination. They're doing a lot of research on this, right? So, but this is 1992, and I don't know anything about near-death experiences. I have no spiritual experience. I don't believe in angels. I don't believe in the afterlife. I don't believe in the spirit world. It was not part of my belief system. And here I am. And now I hear my sister-in-law talking to me, and she had just passed away about 2 weeks earlier from cancer. And she says, everything is going to be okay. And I'm like, yesterday I was outside my body. Now I hear my sister-in-law talking to me. I mean, am I going crazy? I can't tell anybody because they're going to lock me up in the psych ward. Right. And then they sent this very nice Norwegian nurse because they figured I was going to bond with her.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So she goes in and she goes, did anything unusual happen in the ER yesterday? And I knew that's absolutely what she was referring to. And she probably had knowledge about near-death experiences, and she might even have been there. And I just said, no, nothing happened. It was,
oh, wow.
Yeah, I was petrified that if I said something, they were going to lock me up. So then my mother-in-law came. My parents changed their tickets, several times back home to Sweden. And my mother-in-law came and she said, tell me what happened in the ER, because she could tell something was not right. And I hadn't even didn't even tell my parents at that point because I knew my dad was so scientific and I couldn't wrap my head around it. And I was also really sick because I had lost so much blood, and they were going to give me blood in the hospital. That was the first thing they said. And I pleaded with the doctor and I said, do you have to give me blood? I have 3 children under the age of 6. And it was in 1992 when a lot of people that had been given blood transfusions then found out they had AIDS.
AIDS, yes.
So it was during that time. And so we decided not to do blood. And he said, you're a very healthy 34-year-old. I had just gotten my diploma in nutrition. I mean, we had the healthiest diet. I was super healthy going into this ordeal. So they said, you're not going to feel too good for a few months, but we're going to send you home with all these, supplements and medicine and who knows what they gave me. I have no idea. And anyway, so then my mother-in-law came and she said, what happened to you is called a near-death experience. And she went out and she bought the book Life After Life by Raymond Moody. So, and that's how it all began.
Wow.
And then I had this bone marrow suppression, and I had a lot of electrical interference, which are all funny stories. But I'll tell you the second NDE first, and then we can go in talking about all the crazy things that came from all of this. But I was struggling with the bone marrow suppression, and I had bruises. I was getting pneumonia every 6 months, and yeah, I was a mess. And it took a good 6 years to come out of that. And so I couldn't really function normally for like 6 years. And during this struggling of healing, I had a second near-death experience. And I laugh at that now because I feel like I needed it. It was 2 years later. And I feel like I needed that time to put into, to start understanding what happened during the first near-death experience. And I had a lot of spiritual experiences during these 2 years as well. And it started, I would hear the spirit world and things were happening. And then I have my second experience. It's almost like it was divided up.
Sure.
If I had the second experience first, I don't know, I might have checked myself into a psych ward. So during the second experience,
it's a lot to take on.
Right.
Yeah.
During the second experience, again, I get pulled out of my body. Same thing. It's instantaneous. 1 second you're there, and the next second you are not. You're outside. It's just instantaneous transfer of your soul. And I have this feeling of tumbling through darkness, and I get to this place that I call the mid station, because there was an awareness that you could go higher or lower, as if you go into a skyscraper.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And there is 100 floors in this skyscraper. And you get off on the 50th floor. When you're on that 50th floor in the skyscraper, there's floors above you. There's floors below you. You don't know what's on those floors because you're on the 50th floor. You've never been to the other floors. But it was that kind of a feeling, as if I ended up at the bouncing station because they sent me back. You know how some people tell these stories and they say, I had a choice. I could stay if I wanted.
Right. Yeah.
Right? No.
Choice.
There was no choice. It was, you're going
Get
back.
out. You gotta go.
You're not. We're going to tell you this.
Worthy.
But it's very, it's really interesting because, and I know that is in my astrological chart, that I cannot leave. I've been told by an astrologer that I cannot leave until my work is done. So that's just my incarnation. It's very interesting. So anyway, so here I am at the bouncing station, and I hear the most beautiful music. You cannot make this music on earth. And I know other people that have heard music and have tried to recreate it. Yes, it's beautiful, but it's not that quality. It's more beautiful than the music we can make on the earth plane. And I'm going to say there is also something hauntingly familiar about it. It's a very simple melody, almost as if we already know the music. So I sat at our synthesizer for a week trying to recreate it. There was not one sound. And I think there was over 200 sounds on that synthesizer. There was not one sound that even came close. So as I'm looking around, I'm like, where is this beautiful music coming from? I look to the right and I see a little log cabin. And I open the door, I look inside, but it's empty. So then I look to my left and I see another log cabin. And I open the door, I look inside, but it's empty. But then if you've ever been in a really dense fog, right? The fog rolls in and you get completely surrounded in this fog, right? You're in this fog and the sound changes and everything. But it was light. It was the brightest, whitest, healing light you can imagine. And it kind of came in and enveloped me. And as I'm turning around as I'm wondering where this music is coming from, I see an outline of angels. It's like a silhouette of angels in the light, and the music is coming from the angels. But
so multiple angels, and you saw individual
it's like
silhouettes
an angelic
of them?
choir. Okay.
Wow.
But I don't believe in angels. Okay. So here I am again. I'm having experiences and seeing things and hearing things in things that I did not believe. Right? It would be different if I said, of course there are angels, of course there is afterlives, of course there is a God or source or spirit guides, right? I had no belief system that this would exist. And so I'm aware of the fact that I don't believe in angels, but here I'm hearing music coming from this angelic choir, right? So I'm going to say this is because I was so scientific. I had to have experiences where I was being shown things that I didn't believe in. If I had met grandma and grandpa, I would just have completely discounted the whole experience. And I would have said, of course I'm going to see grandma and grandpa. I love grandma and grandpa. Of course I'm going to see them. Sure. Right? So right? So again, I'm having experiences that I didn't believe would be possible. So as that, right? So this light, though, I'm going to say it doesn't matter what your religion is. I don't like to call it God because it sort of pins me down in specific religions, right? So I call it source. You know, we all come from source. We are part of source. Source is just pure unconditional love and consciousness. We carry that light within us. We are part of that consciousness. We're part of that source. And then when, you know, that unconditional love that you get from this light, right? That we have that. We were born that way. And then we were conditioned as we grew up and we became different people. But we came to earth like that, with this light, with this unconditional love. And, you know, when we leave this plane, we go back to that unconditional love. So as I'm standing there, you know, looking into the lights, listening to the angels choir, I become aware of two spirit guides. And the one on my right says to the one kind of left in front of me, "What is she doing here? She has to go back." And I say, no. Wait a second. How can I be outside my body and still be me? How does this work? It's been 2 years of me pondering this, right? And the spirit guide on my left says, well, if I told you, you wouldn't remember. Okay. And I've heard other people talk about like a wiping mechanism, or they have control, right? And I also
say that Men in Black, that neuralizer.
Feeling wiped out after a normal day in public? Always called too sensitive? Take a breath. The sensitivity isn't a flaw. It might just be intuition you were never taught to manage. At the Listening Field Retreat, August 21st to the 23rd at Eaglewood Resort and Spa in Itasca, Gail Alexander shows you how to protect your energy, and Carrie Muller's sound work helps your nervous system finally settle into safety. Space is limited. Click the link below or visit thechillcrew.org/the listening retreat.
No, you're not going to get to remember that. We're not going to tell you, basically, but you will remember this. And then it was as if I was standing on the moon looking down on the earth. But around the earth, there was a silvery, what I called at the time, because this is 1994, a silvery, glittery fishnet. Now, growing up in Sweden, in Stockholm, outside Stockholm, there is an archipelago of about 24,000 islands. And I spent my summers on one of these islands. And there was no electricity, no running water, no phone. So very, very primitive. And I would row this little boat for my grandmother, you know, as a 6-7-year-old with my big orange life vest in the ocean. And she would lay these fish nets to catch fish for the family to eat. But when you lift out these fish nets in the early morning sun, you get these little water droplets on the fish net, and they sort of sparkle in the sunlight. But a fish net has those it's diamond shaped, right? So I see this image, and it looks like literally like the silvery glitter fishnet around the earth. Now with Google, okay, we didn't have Google back then. I searched the San Francisco Public Library again from floor to ceiling. What is this fishnet around the earth? What is, but I couldn't find anything. Probably because I wasn't searching in the right departments of the library, and I didn't want to ask for help because I thought they were going to think I was crazy. So I was just kind of randomly searching the library, right, to find something that could explain why is there no time and what is this fishnet around the earth. Well, so now you can just Google grid around the earth and you're going to see images that look very similar to what I saw. And the spirit guide says, everything on earth is connected to each other. And everything on earth is connected up to this grid. And that is literally what has become my work today with ancestral healing.
Wow.
Because we are all interconnected.
So you talked about a few different things that are of interest to me. And from time to time, we'll have guests on that are well-versed in the God particle and different things like that, interconnectedness or unity consciousness, all of those things. And I love that. Something that I wanted to go back to that I found eye-opening was you can't leave until your work is done. So a side note to that comment was my mother who died in 1994, knew that she was going to die. And in a conversation with my aunt, her sister, and her mother, my grandmother, she waited till my grandmother was off the phone. They did that 3-way calling thing. And she says, Shell, I'm going to die soon. And my Aunt Shell was like, okay, great. How do you know that? How are you going to die? And she said, I don't know how, but I know I'm going to die soon because I dreamt it. And my Aunt Shell said, well, just go back to sleep and dream another dream. And she said, my mom said, it doesn't work like that. I have completed my list. And my aunt said, go back and dream another list. And that's what it was. Go back and dream another list. And my mom said, it doesn't work that way. It's not my list. So that was, that reminded me of essentially what my mom was saying, that her work was done and it was time to leave. And my aunt told me that after, a couple of weeks after my mom's passing. And I always thought that was interesting. The other interesting part was that all of my dealings, experiences, all started with prophetic dreams. And the fact that my mom had that, and I wrote about it actually in my book, that I had those things, and there was a connection there, metaphysically with my mom and I. Out of curiosity, is there anyone else in your family that you know that has the gifts that you do?
Probably my maternal grandmother, because there
Yeah.
was lots of things that happened. In between, when I was 1 year out, in between the two near-death experiences, as soon as I had my first near-death experience, it started, right? I heard my sister-in-law. But I know now that I'm a born medium, right? So it was always there. I saw spirits when I was little. And so when so it was in between the two near-death experiences, and I woke up, my uncle had been sick with lung cancer for many years. I had no idea where he was at, or that he was, going to die soon, or anything like that. He could live another year or two. Who knows? Right?
Sure.
So it was one night, and I woke up, and I was like, wow, my uncle is here. He's in, again, corner, like right in front of my bed, but in the corner, along the ceiling. And he came to tell me that he had passed on, and he had, left the earth plane and gone to the spirit world. And obviously, I expected my mom to call me the next day because it was her brother, right?
Right.
And she didn't call. And I said, wow, that's so weird. My uncle was here last night, and he told me he had passed. And another day went by, and my mom still didn't call. I said, wow, that's so strange. She hasn't called me yet.
That is a little bit, yeah.
And she was probably just grieving, and like, arranging for funerals, and who knows. So then finally, the third day, my mom calls, and she does the little, to chit chat, how are you feeling? How are the kids? Da da da, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right? And then she says, well, I have some sad news to share. And I interrupted her, and I said, yeah, I know. Your brother died. And he was just dead silence on the other side.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And she says, how do you know? And I said, he died 2 days ago, or this is the third day. And she goes, how do you know? I said, he was here. He came to say goodbye. And her response to that was, wow, you're just like your grandmother, her mom.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, and I have memories, right, from when I was little. That was once, and we were on the island with no electricity, no payphone, nothing. So in order for us to make a phone call, we had to get in the little rowboat with a little outboarder motor. And then we had to go, between the islands for about 10 minutes until we got to a bigger island that had a payphone on it. Okay. So that's how we made phone calls. I get down to my grandmother's house, and she says, we have to go make a phone call. My friend passed away at 2 a.m. And I was like, how do you know? The bird came and it hit my window and it told me, she had passed.
Oh, goodness.
And so I said, okay, so me and my brother took grandma to the other island to make the phone call. And sure enough, that was the news that person had passed away at 2 a.m. when the bird came.
Wow.
So, you have all these crazy experiences. And I've had many crazy experiences. The future, there are times when I feel like, are we just avatars? The soul is inhabiting this body, and this is my little avatar when I'm here on earth, because the soul survives death, right? We go on to the spirit world and we're still there, right? Because I'm a medium and I work as a medium as well. So, that when you bring in a spirit from the spirit world, they come through showing their personality. That's how we know who it is.
Right.
So if they were not a nice person, if they were, let's say, an alcoholic and they were abusive in some way, that's what they're going to show me first. And I'm going to say there's a man here, and it feels like it's a really close family. It could be your father or grandfather, but he had a drinking problem and he was not nice and he would yell and scream, when he got drunk. Yep, that's my dad, says the client, right?
Wow.
And then the spirit changes and says, I am so sorry for all the harm I caused you, right? So we have that turnaround, but when they come through, they're going to show who they were, because if they came through and said, oh, I'm
so sorry.
Blah, blah, I love you, blah, blah, blah. We're not going to recognize the person. So they have to show who they were first, so we can recognize and we know who we're talking to.
Sure.
And then the apologies come and they're really sorry. And they're, I'm going to say the most common is, they're sorry for the harm they caused you. And they're, often proud of the, you as a person. But you can see that turnaround, because I'm going to say, we have an agenda when we're here and we're supposed to incarnate. We have some free will, and maybe that person was given a chance to correct that in this life, but they couldn't. They couldn't correct the alcoholism. They couldn't correct the abuse. They just couldn't do it. And so here we go. They're probably going to do another life and try and correct it again. Who knows? But you know what I'm saying? It's just we come with an agenda. We may fulfill it or we may not. And sometimes I think what astrologers have told me, that some people come, it's like a cross in their chart. And so it makes it very difficult for them to change in this life. They came with a personality, and that's part of the lesson they're learning in this life is, they're getting a divorce and they have to stand on their own feet. They have to find their way in this life. And that's just, they incarnated for that. And they have to find their own path. They have to find their own way. They have to get out of that jam on their own. You can't, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So, so it's really interesting because we come with that agenda. And, when my mom said, oh my gosh, you're just like your grandmother. And then I started, having more and more experiences, and years went by. And it took me 12 years to trust in the spirit world. It's like I needed so much proof and so much evidence. Yeah. And every time something would happen or I would know something, I would write it down. I would tell my kids. I would tell my husband. Because otherwise I would just say, oh, it was just a deja vu. It was just my memory playing tricks on me. And so if I wrote it down or told someone, I could say, okay, well, I wrote it down. I did have this knowledge yesterday or 3 days ago. And I knew my dad was passing away. So my dad had a stroke. And this is like year 2000. He had a stroke and he was 81 at the time. And I called one of my brothers. I have 3 older brothers and one is a surgeon. And I called my surgeon brother and I said, hey, should I get on a flight like now, tomorrow? Because we were living in California and it takes 24 hours to get to Sweden. And he said, he's doing well. They've moved him. They're going to be moving him into the rehab. He's lost his ability to speak, but he's laughing at our jokes. So we know he's understanding what we're saying.
That's wonderful.
Right. So he said, you just come. I think this was like Tuesday or Wednesday. And he said, just come next week. So we said, all right, I'm going to bring the kids. My kids were like 12, 9.5, and 6 or 7 at the time.
Oh, wow.
So my husband was going to stay behind. I was going to bring the kids over. We had just recently, 3 months earlier, we had moved to San Francisco. So my kids were like in a transition space. So it was easy to bring the kids along. And as we were going to the bookstore that Friday afternoon, so now it's Friday evening in Sweden, I kept seeing a coffin, and I knew it was my dad's coffin. And I saw it on an angle from above. Now, any funeral I had ever been to in Sweden, right, the coffin is either horizontally or vertically placed up in the church in the front of the people. I'm seeing the coffin from above on an angle. It's very weird, right? And it's a white coffin. It's with a specific flower arrangement with kind of like dark red, violet flowers. So I keep seeing the coffin, and then I keep telling my husband, I keep seeing my coffin. I know my dad's going to die. And my husband says, no, he's not going to die. Your brother said they moved him into rehab. He's doing well. Nobody is calling you. You're just worried about him. Well, it kept going.
Which makes sense, by the way, that you would. Right.
Perfect sense. And so then we get there. We get there to, Tuesday morning. We fly out Monday, get there Tuesday morning. And it wasn't one of my brothers meeting me. It was my sister-in-law. So right away, I knew something was wrong. And she said, we have to go now. And I'm like, can we use the restroom? And she's like, no, we're leaving now. And we're like, okay. So, because it was bumpy, like the last 2 hours. And we were like, okay, we're just getting in the car. And, drove about 45 minutes to get into the city. And she drops me off at the hospital. She takes my kids. And I get up, upstairs. And my dad passes away an hour after I get there. So, he literally just waited. But here comes the interesting part. So then, of course, we changed our tickets to go back home. My mom takes us to the flower store. We're getting flowers for the funeral. There's I don't know if it was 2 or 3 thick binders with flower arrangements. She narrows it down to this one page. One has like a blue flower arrangement, and on the bottom right corner in this binder was the exact flower arrangement that I had seen in the image of the image of the coffin with the flower arrangement.
Oh my goodness.
She asks me, she says, which one do you think I should pick? The blue one or this one? Well, I know which one I had seen in the image. Right. So the science person that I am, I need confirmation on everything because I'm still going through my, learning to trust. Yeah. So I said to Mom, well, you knew Dad the best. Why don't you pick the one that you think he would have liked the best? So she goes, I think he would have liked this one, the dark red, violet ones. So she picks the exact flower arrangement that I had seen in the image on that coffin. Then we get to the funeral. It's held in this cremation center. So I don't know what happened with the church thing. He didn't want to have, I guess my dad didn't want to have a funeral in the church for whatever reason. Okay. So we were in this cremation center, and it was a round room. And it was a round room, and it had like little bleachers that were going up. So you were like sitting on tiers in this round room. And so now I understand why I saw the coffin from above on an angle. But again, I don't want to go sit in that spot. So I'm going to ask the person. I said, hi, my name is, I am the daughter of the deceased. Where should I be sitting? And she goes, right there. And so she takes me to my seat. And guess what? It was the exact angle from above on the right that I had seen the image. So what does all this mean? Why is it that we can see the future before it happens, right? And I have many stories like that when I've seen the future. But because you talked about, your mom dying, that's the story that came. But we can see the future, right? I'll tell you a quick other story, which is, I was doing my residency up in the mountains, 2 hours north towards Sedona, here in Arizona. And I was going down to Phoenix to visit my daughter. I grabbed my car keys and my purse off the kitchen counter. As I do that, I hear, watch out for the red truck. And I see an image of a red truck that swerves into the left lane and back into the right lane. And I know it's on the 17 freeway that goes through the mountains down into the valley to Phoenix. So I get in my car, I drive 45 minutes, I finally get to the 17, and I'm on this freeway. I know what the message was. Watch out for the red truck. So white truck, black truck, white truck. There's so many white trucks here. Eventually, I come up on a red truck. So I'm sitting behind. So there's only 2 lanes on this freeway. I'm behind the truck. There is a car passing it. So I'm like, well, I heard the warning, watch out for the red truck. I have a guardrail on my left. So if I follow the car in front of me, And this truck then swerves into the left lane. I have nowhere to go. I'm going to get squeezed off into the ravine, basically, off the guardrail, right?
Right.
So I'm not going to do that. So I'm sitting behind the truck. I know to trust the messages. So I sit behind the truck. I wait and wait and wait for this car to finally pass and be in front of the truck enough space that when I don't have the guardrail anymore and there's a shoulder, I can, quickly try and pass the truck.
Right.
Well, I'm sitting behind the truck. The other car is now completely in front of the truck. What does the truck do? It completely swerves into the left lane and back into the right. And I'm just like, thank you, Spirit World. Thank you for saving me.
Oh, my goodness.
And I've had lots of experiences like that, so people out there that are listening, when you get a message like that, don't discount it. Don't discount it. That could be your spirit guide. It could be an ancestor. You're getting that information from somewhere, and just trust it. Better to be safe than sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
Every single time.
Yeah.
Every single time.
But, what is that? So, the future is already there, right? Is that why there was no time on the other side? Why is it that we can see the future? I saw my kids. If it's all running
simultaneously, right?
I saw my kids in a remote viewing when we lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. My kids were in the city, and my son was driving the car, and his girlfriend was in the front seat. My daughter, who was about 14 at the time, was in the back seat. And I'm on my way. I'm walking into the kitchen. We're like 40 minutes from the city in a suburb in East Bay, San Francisco. And as I walk to the kitchen, all of a sudden, it's like I'm standing on the sidewalk in San Francisco. I see my kids at the red light, and I can see my son looking at the light. He's waiting for the light to turn red, and he's going to whip the car around, do a U-turn when it's on yellow going to red.
Okay.
So he waits for that. I can see him looking at the light. It's yellow, it's going to red. There is a truck bombing down the street in the opposite direction. And as it goes from yellow to red, my son whips the car around, thinking that the truck is going to stop.
The truck
accelerates. He's saying, I can make it through before the red light. So as my son is making a U-turn, the truck accelerates and literally misses my kid's car by an inch. Right? I literally feel like I'm having a heart attack in the kitchen. I literally sat down at my kitchen counter for 10 minutes to wait for my heart to stop pounding. And I can see my kid's car going off into the distance. So I knew they were okay. And then when they came home, like an hour or two later, I said, well, I'm going to feed them first, because they had done a rehearsal. They were in the performing arts. And so I knew they were really hungry. So I said, I'm going to feed them first. As soon as my daughter took the last bite, she looks up at me and she goes, Mom, we almost got hit by a truck. And I said, yeah, I know. I saw you make the U-turn.
Oh my
goodness. My kid's jaws, just dropped. It's just like stared at me. And that's the only time I've had that experience of seeing something, live. And I know, like, the military used to do research on this, back in the 70s. I've learned that from, trying to figure out, how can you see something at a distance, but, we're all connected. And especially to our children and loved ones, we're very, very much connected to them. And, and also I'm here on my spiritual journey in this life. I'm this spiritual healer. And I think, part of it is having a lot of experiences so that I can help other people understand their experiences, but also to turn it around and bring healing for people.
So you mentioned something about the military doing that, and I know that still goes on, CIA, and wasn't the Monroe Institute really integral in that?
Yeah.
I thought so. I had read about that, and I know that you a couple of different things. I listened to some of the recordings, the Monroe recordings, and find them fascinating. And I know that they're on HemiSync, and you're on HemiSync, and as well as the Shift Network, which I believe Suzanne Geisman is on there. I one of the faculty.
Yeah, I'm also on the faculty for the Shift Network.
I've taught several courses
for them. I've taught a lot of ancestral healing courses for the Shift Network.
So I'm glad we're kind of making that segue, because epigenetics comes into play, and we're talking about the scientific bridge, if you will, between metaphysical and science.
And epigenetics is something that is becoming increasingly more prevalent as far as a theory and an understanding of how things happen, which then goes to the ancestral healing, correct? Is that's where your tie comes in? So I want to talk about that. And I also want to talk about one thing else that you've mentioned before about the angelic choirs and frequency, which, hemisync is a lot of, music or solfeggio frequencies, that sort of thing, as well as other recordings. But the frequencies and sound patterns that you're involved with as far as synchronization of brainwave activities, and can we talk a little bit about that? Because there's an obvious correlation between those things and the Drop the Needle podcast, because music being such a big part of my life, but also one of my dear friends, Carrie Muller, is a sound therapist, certified sound therapist, as well as hypnotherapist, and so on and so forth. And she makes beautiful soundscapes. And that's one of the things that we talk about regularly because of the meditations that I do in conjunction with her soundscapes in the background, depending upon what we're working on for that particular meditation. But I want you to tell me about essentially that being a clinical tool, not just to catch some sort of vibe and be, and be in the, flow state is a vibe too. But I'll stop talking now because I'm trying to explain everything when you can do it much better. So have at it, please.
Well, the frequencies, I'm not like a physicist or anything like that, but
yes, but you are a science. You're involved with science and medicine,
right? Everything is a frequency in the end. We have a frequency for disease, right? The disease,
right?
If you have, your frequency is off. The way I look at it, it's like the whole body is like an orchestra, right? And right, so I'm very musical. That's why we get along.
That's right.
Yes. I mean, it's because I grew up in music and I always hear music in my head. And so the body is like an orchestra. Now, if you listen to an orchestra and one violin is out of tune, you are going to hear that. You're going to say, what is that?
Attention is drawn right to it. Yes.
Right? It's off key. Right? Or if somebody is singing with the orchestra,
same thing,
off key, right? You're going to know, wow, it's off key. I mean, it's the same thing with the body. The body, we have kind of broken down in Western medicine, the body, oh, you have a heart problem. Let's look at the heart. Oh, you have a liver problem. Let's look at the liver, right? We kind of compartmentalize it. Everything works together, which is now why we have more functional medicine doctor, holistic medicine, right? We're looking at the whole being. Everything plays a role. It's not just that one thing. You can have severe headaches, okay? You can have severe headache problems because you have what's called nutcracker syndrome, where the blood leaving typically the left kidney is being compressed between the aorta and the superior mesenteric artery. So it looks like a nutcracker on imaging. Now, if the blood can't leave the kidney, what is the blood going to do? It's going to flow backwards, okay? It's going to go back through the kidney, back down. It says, well, that highway is blocked, right? So think of it as like the blood has all these vessels. It's just like a road map. All these different roads. You got highways, you got kind of surface streets, you got the dirt roads that are kind of the smaller vessels, right? And so when there is a backup, you're going to say, well, I'm going to get off the freeway. I'm going to take the surface streets. And you're going to go around that accident. It's blocked. It's traffic. There's road work. The blood is moving so slowly because it's being compressed. So that vein kind of gets narrow right there. So the blood can't flow normally. Now, you're thinking, well, I'm getting a headache. What does that have to do with the blood leaving my left kidney? Well, the blood is going to make new pathways, and it's going to increase the pressure in other blood vessels in the spinal cord, and then that's going to trigger your headache. Has nothing to do with your head, right?
Right.
So I'm saying, so
Yeah.
this is a perfect example of how you have to look at the whole being and not just the head. Because if you say, oh, well, you have a headache, must be a migraine then. Do you have an aura? Do you have this? Or maybe it's triggered by the pollen. It's something you ate. You didn't get enough sleep. You must be experiencing stress, right? And you go down and nothing is helping. Yeah, because that's not where the problem is. The problem is a little tiny blood vessel that's not, it's the traffic jam down there. And you got to fix the traffic jam, right? So we can see that in sometimes we have to look at the whole body. But that's also when, the frequency is now off for that person. So they're not feeling well. They keep getting headaches. Nobody knows what's wrong. So they're just getting pain medication. And the problem is never getting fixed until you actually have surgery and correct the problem. Right. But many times it's like that. And many times people fall through the cracks because the way we're trained, these
Western medicine.
You have to see a specialist in order for that to get found. Right? Because if you have a headache and you go to the doctor, they're going to look in your head because it's as if this is by itself. Your little head it doesn't belong to the body below you.
Let me get that head off the shelf. Yes.
Right? And then you get disease, right? Then your frequency gets off because you can't function. You're tired. You're exhausted. Your blood's not flowing. You have headaches, right? And then now what happens with that? All those problems is probably going to cause another problem. Right. And then that problem causes another problem because now you're exhausted and then you get adrenal fatigue and then your hormone balance get off and it just becomes this cascade, right?
Right.
So now you have 6 problems instead of 1 problem.
The one.
Right. But it's everything is frequencies, in the end, because everything is energy in the end. Right. And so when we look at, the frequencies, and you also mentioned, the epigenetics, right? So epigenetics is what runs the hardware, right? Our genetic code. So it's not really that different from a computer. If you have a computer, you got all the hardware, you need the software to do stuff for you. But it's kind of the same with the body. So the epigenetics runs the code, right? So that's just what the epigenetics does. But that epigenetics, we change the coding based on our experiences. So epigenetics, we now express something different. And now let's say you were born with this cancer gene, like the BRCA gene. Doesn't mean you're going to get breast cancer. You were born with a gene, but hey, you need the epigenetics, you need the software to run it. You need the perfect circumstances to activate it to produce the cancer. And that could be, you were exposed to water contamination or the pesticides that spray on the golf course. And your system has codes that says, your detox doesn't work that well. And so you're more prone to get an issue. So the whole family can have this gene. Your sister has it, your mom has it, your grandma has it. Doesn't mean and none of them got it, but you got breast cancer. Yeah, because your genetic code is different. Your detox cycle doesn't work as well. And now you got a problem, right? So it's never, it's not as simple as we think it is when we look into things.
Right.
There's so many different components because the whole body works like an orchestra. Like all the different parts are playing together. And you have to figure out which part is it that's not working in order to fix it.
I find it incredibly fascinating to, I oftentimes will call these things rabbit holes for me because they are. I'm just so intrigued by these topics. Well, tell me more about that. Well, what about that? Well, those types of things. And so I know we're running out of time here. Would you be open to doing another show too? Would you be?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it actually happens quite often because we have so much to talk about sometimes.
A ton to talk about, and which is, I want to talk because I had mentioned it in the beginning about the session where I was fortunate enough to have an ancestral healing session with you, and we were talking about
where you came from.
well, yes. So why don't while I'm trying to remember exactly what I wanted to touch on with that. Why don't you maybe explain a little bit, give a little background on what ancestral healing is for everyone in the Kendria, is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah, Kendria.
Yes, healing session.
Yeah. So, we are all connected, right? So I learned that with that silvery, glittery fishnet. And it couldn't be more true. So when you work with ancestral healing, we all came from somewhere, right? We all have parents. Even if we don't know our parents, even if we were adopted, we came from somewhere, right? We came from that genetic code. So half of you have mom's DNA and half of it is dad's DNA, right? You can't, that's
Right.
how this world works. But then also, how you were treated, how you grew up, what was instilled in you when you grew up. And let's say, to make things easy, let's say you were raised by your biological parents.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they were raised a certain way. They were raised by their parents or whoever raised them. The things that they learned, right, is how their nervous system adapted to that. And we all, in the end, we all want to belong. We all want to be loved. But depending on what they were struggling with. So ancestral healing is the struggles that weren't resolved in the previous generation. So to make something very simple, let's say you're married to a partner. Let's say you're female, because this is just a common issue. And this female complains and says, I don't understand it. I unload the dishwasher, 3 times a day, and I do the laundry. And, my partner is very helpful, but I always have to tell him, like, can you please take the garbage out? Can you please do this? Can you please do that? And so she carries the mental load, right? Having to make sure she remembers everybody's birthday, and she knows what needs to be brought home from the grocery store. She does all the planning, right? And then she's irritated about that, right? Well, where did that come from? Many times we say, how do I make my partner help more, right? And that's all, you got to start somewhere. But when we take a look at it, what was your mom like? When you start asking them, what was your mom like? My mom was a homemaker. She did everything. She did all the laundry. She did all the cooking. She was very subservient to my dad. Yes. And guess what? Subconsciously, even though you told yourself that you're not going to do the same thing as your mom did, you are, because it's subconscious. So we learn these things, when we're just little toddlers, we see that and we want to blend in. We want to be like mom and dad. And it doesn't matter, even if we hate that and says, I'm never going to be like you.
Right.
And when we push something away, that also has a tendency to come back. So let's say this young woman, her mom did everything at home and she didn't like her dad because he was an alcoholic. And guess what? She married an alcoholic and she does everything in the house. Yeah, she rejected dad. So it comes back through the partner. And then we do all the dishes because that's what mom did. So so patterns repeat, and it doesn't matter sometimes if we reject it or we repeat it, but it has a tendency to come back. So that's like, in a nutshell, what ancestral healing is.
Sure.
We think we are independent, but we are not as independent as we think we are, and these things also transfer down on your DNA. So the traumatic events of your ancestors actually change the coding because they changed the epigenetics and the expression of that. And we know from research that we can see, they've done research on Holocaust survivors, that the certain genes are expressing in the grandchildren that came from the traumatic events that those grandparents experienced. So it's it's a big enchilada, because it's not
yes, it is.
It's not just one thing. It's not just the DNA. It's not just the environment. It's a soup of all of it. And your own experiences. It could be what you experienced in school. How your
that's some of the extra spice, right?
Right. It's exactly. It's a lot to take into account. But that is so it doesn't really matter what the problem is. You could have lost connection with a family member, or one of your children have lost communication. That happens a lot. And then you do ancestral healing. But because we are all connected, when we do a healing, people tell me the most miraculous things happen. This one woman hadn't spoken to her mom in 10 years. And then, 6 months goes by and she comes back, oh, I want to heal something else now, And I said, how did it go with your mom? And she goes, we're best friends now. We talk every day.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. And other people too who have lost connection with their children. And 2 weeks goes by and they say, you won't believe who just called me. That daughter who I haven't spoken to in 4 years.
That's
so
wonderful.
I'm going to say this is that spooky action at a distance, Einstein said, right? But it's more like magic because we are all interconnected. We don't know exactly how that works.
Right.
But there is something very divine that, we're being guided through.
Vision boards, affirmation, still stuck? Here's what nobody tells you. It's hard to manifest from a body still stuck in survival mode. Sometimes the vision has to wait for the body to catch up. At the Listening Field Retreat, August 21st to the 23rd at Eaglewood Resort and Spa, Julie Grant clears old family patterns. Carrie Muller uses sound to bring your body back online, and Jim Alstott shows you what it takes to turn intention into something you live. You don't need another notebook. You need to feel different. Visit thechillcrew.org/the listening retreat.
So then we went through the session, which I will say was really interesting on a number of levels. And it started out with the 13-question email that was asking about backgrounds and in different situations, or if there was something going on physically or emotionally or what have you. And you had a few different options as far as that was concerned. But then when we started, and I won't give everything away because I really think people would benefit from your sessions. But I will say that prior to the show, we were talking about what happened. And one of the things Dr. Lotte said was, it'll start to open up, and we both use the term unravel as time goes on. And I had an unraveling of sorts on Saturday evening, and which went all the way into Sunday evening at basically 9:45 when I couldn't stay awake any longer, and my body just kind of shut down. So what started was, and I had explained to Dr. Lotte what was happening, and the best words I can use to describe it were, and actually she mentioned it, was almost like having a bit of a seizure, like a jolt. And it's that whole body jolt jump of when you're just about to fall asleep and it's boom, and then you wake up. Well, here's the thing. I wasn't asleep and this was going on. I was wide awake. My eyes were closed most of the time. Not all of the time, but most of the time. And these scenes or images or questions, dialogue was going on. And it was when, at the end of that, which happened to be very quick, by the way, and you had mentioned this, it's almost like your body, your operating system within your body needing an upgrade. You're upgrading the system in order to accept or be able to interpret what's being said to you, because otherwise it's just, as you had mentioned about using the typewriter, it's just a bunch of letters. Then it didn't mean anything. So at the end of each sequence, as I said, that was relatively quick, and it could have been 60 seconds, 90 seconds, somewhere in there, boom, it would be another jolt, and then on to something else, and on to something else. And if this was any indication of each time there was a jolt, that was something I needed to work on, there was a lot of them, and it continued on for the better part of the night until I finally decided, okay, that's enough. I'm getting up. And that was about 3:45 when that happened. And I'm sorry I'm bouncing around, but it's how my brain works. And one of the things that during the session, Dr. Lotte does a meditation. And during the meditation, I had said to her, she said, did anything interesting come up during the meditation? I said, well, yeah, for sure. And I said it was odd. I didn't know why, but it was the image of somebody with their hand on the wall, bent over and vomiting. It's not a pretty mental image necessarily. And she said, "Oh yes, that's you're purging that." I was like, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." Why I didn't put two and two together? Of course, it's not my program; it's your program. So it's why you know.
Yeah.
But so that was one of the things. Other things that came up in there were, they were energetic images or beings. I shouldn't say images, forms. That's probably the best way to put it, because it didn't take on the features of a face or anything, but they were moving, and they would move in, and it was like they were trying to tell me something, or the energy was displaying something, sharing something, and it'd move out of the way, and another one would come in, and another one would come in. And I had mentioned to Dr. Lotte, I said, this is very strange, but there was an image of two puppies, black and white, that just kept melding one into the other. And it wasn't like anything gross. It was just, okay, here's white, now it's black, now it's white, on top of each other, just coming in and out like a yin and yang scenario, is what she had said. So that was my experience. I'm sure many others have, interesting experiences as well. But the long and short of the experiences throughout the night had to do with more me than anything else. It wasn't like, oh, why is this person doing this to me? It was nothing like that. It was more internal. And like one of the things that came up was, when did this sort of behavior, or accepting the environment that is, I would say, relatively negative, when did that become acceptable to you? Why is that acceptable to you? Do you know what that's doing to you? And it was, the questions like that would come up, and I didn't even have an opportunity to answer them. It was boom, boom, and like I said, with the jolts. So, but you had said something about Kundalini awakening. Actually, why don't I'm going to turn it over to you, because the interpretation of these things is obviously where you're going to be the expert, instead of me going, I wonder why that happened. So,
I've had many experiences like that myself, when the body jolts, and it always coincides with some kind of a spiritual awakening. Mm-hmm. So I've come to learn that it's part of like a Kundalini awakening, and I used to get a lot of energy running up my spine ever since I had my first near-death experience. But as time went on, I would also experience these random jolts, right? And it would be, several, one a minute, just going on. To the point when I even considered having a seizure disorder. I'm like, but this is not a seizure, right? Just the body jolting. But it would always coincide with, seeing more information, having access to more information from the spirit world, becoming more aware in one way or another. And so now I just call it the computer upgrades, because literally it's like you're getting an upgrade. You're becoming more aware. You're changing the way you perceive things. You're having an easier time access the spirit world. So, there's something to that. And I'm going to say the spirit world is, there are people that go to like Kundalini yoga.
Right.
I worked with many of those people, and then they get sick because they're forcing it. They're pushing it, right? they're pushing their body into something that the body's not ready for yet. It's better to, I'm going to say, if you want to have a Kundalini awakening, just meditate. Because if you're supposed to have these jolts, then you're just going to experience them. Do you have to have jolts to have a Kundalini awakening? No, of course not. There's all different ways of having these experiences, right? I'm just going to say, I had the jolts, you had the jolts. We're on a very specific kind of spiritual journey in this life. And other people may just have energy running up their spine. I had that for years. I had that for probably 25 years before I had the jolts. So for a very long time, I had a lot of, just random spinal, energy from the base of my spine and up my spine. So, everybody's on their own journey. So I'm going to say, don't try and force something that because somebody else had that, And, I had near-death experiences. That was just part of my journey. They're in my astrological chart. I know I incarnated to have those experiences. They serve this purpose. You can have a spiritually transformative experience, an STE, that serves the same purpose as the NDE. And I'm like, I wish sometimes
without having the flat line.
Right. Sometimes people tell me, I wish I had an NDE. And I'm thinking to myself, no, you don't. Because a near-death experience means there was also trauma involved in that. And you're going to have to resolve that trauma and the PTSD that comes with having that near-death experience. But if you have a spiritually transformative experience, it will have the exact same effect on you as a near-death experience, right? So I'm saying you can be spiritually transformed without the PTSD and the trauma involved. So, and how do we become more aware? You meditate.
Yes.
And it's when we find that stillness within that we can now hear what's beyond.
So one of the things that came up to, we were talking about NDEs, you had mentioned that there's, that white light, the bright light and things like that. They're very similar, or going through this tunnel of light. I know that there's more and more studies coming up right now about DMT and the release from the pineal gland. What are your thoughts about that? And I just opened up a whole new can of worms with that. And then you could go from DMT that's naturally manufactured in the pineal to the DMT that you can do from like a plant event or what have you.
Yeah, I'm going to say, again, it's different experiences, right? So I know Eben Alexander, the neurosurgeon who was in a coma.
Yes.
Very famous, right?
Yes.
For his NDE, because he was a neurosurgeon and he had this whole near-death experience, even though there was no brain activity. And so he's been, I know he was part of something. I'm going to say it could have been a movie where he spoke about, where he was like interviewed. But I know that he was part of something.
There was a documentary with him.
They did like a DMT, and he said the DMT experience was like looking through a keyhole versus going through the keyhole and seeing the whole enchilada on the other side. So it's like I'm going to say the DMT probably gives people a glimpse into that, or people who do, ayahuasca and all these different things, that they get like a glimpse of something on the other side. But again, how do I know? I can't, how do we compare that? Are there people that had a full-blown experience with an ayahuasca or something? I'm sure there are, right? And that's what's so difficult, because I think part of it is what we're here to experience. We all have some kind of an agenda. We also have the free will, right? It's not a clear cut system. It's everything is integrated into each other. Part of it is you incarnated to have this experience. This is what you signed up for in your astrological chart, but you also have free will, and you can learn your lesson by taking one of these 5 routes, and you're going to end up at the same. It's like saying, I want to get to point B in the city. Well, there's many different options. You could take the subway, you could take the bus, you could drive. There's 5 different routes.
Walk.
Right? Yeah. I mean, but you're still going to get to that building where you're going. But I feel like life is similar like that. So we have free will, but we're also all going to get to that building, right? But there's different routes to get there.
Yep.
And there's different experiences along the way. And so you have 5 options. You could choose experience A, experience B, experience C. Okay, I'm going to take C. that means you're going to get a flat tire and tow your car, and something else is going to happen, right?
Right.
You took the route B, but you're still going to end up in the same spot.
Yeah.
So it's like different routes to get to the same end point.
So, and I love that. I had a debate about something similar with someone a while ago, and they were telling someone, no, you're wrong, it's this way. And I said, well, hold on a second. It seems to me that there are a number of ways to accomplish a goal, right? Yeah. So why is there only one right way? There isn't. The answer is there isn't.
Exactly.
It's that person's way of doing it, which may not be yours, and that's totally fine, by the way. But that doesn't mean that you dismiss what that person just said or believes, because at this very moment, that's what they believe. That doesn't mean it won't change. And maybe they will come around to your way of thinking, but you have to leave the door open in order to recognize that there are other ways of doing things. So what I'd like to do is, do you have your musical answers prepared?
Yes,
by
do.
chance? So what we're going to do for this one is we're going to do rapid fire on the questions, okay? Because I want to get your playlist, because I wasn't kidding. I know you're busy, but we're going to do another show relatively quickly because I've got so much I want to talk about, and I think people would absolutely love to know this. So here we go with the questions. Number 1, what was the first song that you fell in love with from the radio?
It was Deo, the Banana Boat song by Harry Belafonte.
Love it. Love it.
I used to play that like over and over. I'm sure I drove my parents crazy.
Love that.
Yeah.
Okay. What about, I'm not sure that this happened or not, but did your family have a song that everyone would sing on road trips? Or okay,
I came from a musical family, and my mom would often sing, and it was always The Sound of Music. So because that came out when I was a little kid, and I think I was like 7 or 8 years old when that movie came out, but I couldn't see over the people in the movie theater, and I had to sit on my mom's huge purse, because back then in the 60s they had those huge
bags.
Like a bag.
Yes. Yeah.
And
can you grab my bag? I can't pick it up.
Right, to see the movie. And so it was Do Re Mi, Sound of Music with Julie Andrews.
Wonderful. How about this one? What was your favorite song that you and your friends would belt out when you were in school?
Okay, so I grew up during the ABBA movement. I also grew up in Sweden, and Benny Anderson went to my elementary school.
Get out!
Yeah, but he was out of that school by the time I got there, because he was born probably like 12 years before I was born. Right. So, but he went to my school. So it was ABBA.
Okay.
Dancing Queen by ABBA and
cool.
That song came out when we were in high school.
Love it. Now, what about when you went to university? Did your musical taste change?
Oh, yes. So I'm going to say college. So that was, like, I want to say 1977. So I graduated high school in 1977. And that fall, I went to a junior college in Boston. And just to see, because my relationship with my American boyfriend was getting serious, and kind of wanted to see, do I want to live in the United States? I had already visited twice within the past 2 years. And so it was very much more raucous. The song that came out was "We Will Rock You" with Queen.
Oh, Queen, yeah.
And the Champion song came out.
Yes.
That came out at the same time. You Are the Champion.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And that's what we were all singing all the time, because it was always playing on the radio. It was a big, big hit. Right. And it still is.
Fantastic. Yeah. That's so far you've got all originals. Nobody else has picked one. What about a guilty pleasure song? Do you have a guilty pleasure song?
A guilty pleasure song that, like, you mean now, not the Positive Juices one.
No, well, you can do Positive Juices, and
Okay.
we'll hit the.
All right,
the guilty pleasures.
Positive Juices song. Okay, you're going to laugh at this because they're all musicals. So the first one is The Circle of Life by Lion King.
Love it.
And so literally, I don't think one day goes by without me singing that walking through the house.
I love that.
I don't know. It just gets me going. So Circle of Life. Do you hear the people sing?
Oh, Les Mis. Yep.
Yeah, Les Mis. And then The Phantom of the Opera.
Oh.
Can't say, and I mean, I can just go on Ragtime. So I'm going to say all these, all the,
Love that.
they have so much oomph in them. It's just, you hear those songs and it's just like, you're ready to run a marathon. I mean,
yeah,
it's ready to go.
No, that's fantastic. My family was, well, not my father, but my mom, my grandfather, musical, very creative and very good musicians, actually. How about we go to, what's a song that you believe could change the way people think about the world, think or feel about the world in a positive way if they just listen to the song's lyrics?
I'm going to say Imagine by John Lennon.
Okay.
Because we're all one, yep. No borders. We're all people of the earth.
Yes, that's a good one. That's a really good one. This is my favorite one, and it will be the last one for us.
Okay, we skip one. We skipped the guilty pleasure.
I know we did, and we're going to do that because when we do our next one, I want to have some other questions for it. Okay. I purposefully went by a couple of them, but sometimes there are songs that you hear that ring so true that they can stop you in your tracks. The song's lyrics sound like they were either written specifically for you or by you. What's that song?
I'm going to say, so I have 3 kids and they were all in the professional performing arts. So they were all professional performers, musical, like lead roles in musicals and things like that. Not children's theater, professional theater. And my son, when he was 12, he was the lead in The Children of Eden. And there's a song, and then my other son was also in it. He was 10. They wanted to put my daughter in it, but she was too small for the costumes. The costumes were from Broadway. It was the Los Angeles Lyric Opera, I think, that put that on. And there's one song there that's called The Hardest Part of Love. And the text is, you cannot close the acorn once the oak begins to grow. And you cannot close your heart to what it feels it needs to know. And the hardest part of love is letting go, right? And so I got my kids in this show, right? And I stuck with me all these years. And this was in we're talking year 2000 or 1998, 1999, when they did that show. So my kids were still little, but it's so true, right? Because the kids are that acorn. And when they, that the tree begins to grow, you have to just, you try and make them strong. And the text is all about, you make them strong and then you have to watch them fly off, right? Yeah. And that means that you succeeded because they're flapping their wings and they're flying off on their own. But it's also the hardest thing to do is to let go. The hardest part of love is to let go and let that other person fly free. And even in relationships, that's hard.
Yes. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much for those great songs. And thank you so much for your time and sharing everything with us. This has really been quite amazing. Well, it's just about time to cue the music for today's episode, but don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the Drop the Needle podcast to stay up to date on our latest episodes. I would also like to take a moment to thank our very special guest, Dr. Lotte Valentin, for being with us today. Lotte, can you do me a favor and please let our listeners know how to get in touch with you?
Yes, the easiest way is to go to my website, DR for doctor, LOTTE.com. And on there, you can schedule a session, work with me one-on-one, or also join my newsletter, because that's how you're going to stay up to date on everything that's happening and courses that I teach, etc. So I hope to see you all there.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. All right, my drop the needle posse, like Billy Joel says, from the highs to the lows to the end of our show. This is the end of our show. Thank you again for being the best part of us. Catch you next time.
Thank you.